So now, let's go to our study of Revelation chapters 8 and 9. And this is probably more than we can cover in 1 week. If we can cover it, we will. And if we can't, we will break and finish it up next week. But we wanted to put it together because this contains most of the information about the sounding of the 7 trumpets. And so we've already done the 7 seals. The 7 seals covered the whole 7-year period of the tribulation. And it's not year by year, 7 years, but it's, the war, first of all, Antichrist coming into the fore, whether he's recognized as Antichrist or not, the wars, the famines, the plagues, and all that, and the martyrs. And all of that takes you through the tribulation period and ends with the 6th seal, which we believe is one of the several places in Revelation where you have visions of Armageddon. But after that, the 7th seal, which we're going to look at right now in chapter 8, verse 1, is a short period of silence in heaven, and that's all it says about it. But it introduces the 7 trumpets. So the way that I have felt, and many others feel the same way, about trying to do a chronology with Revelation, is that since the 7 seals cover the whole tribulation period, they're just one 7-sealed scroll. Okay? But the 7th seal has this other information about the 7 trumpets, and then later on the 7 vials of the wrath of God right at the very end, so that it's most likely that the 7 trumpets take place during the second half of the tribulation, which Jesus called the Great Tribulation. He divided the time up, and some of you have been through this before in Matthew 24. He divided the time up between the beginning of birth pangs, which is the period before the tribulation that I believe we're living in right now, the tribulation, which is the first part of it, the Great Tribulation that begins with Antichrist revealing himself and becoming a economic dictator, imposing the mark of the beast and setting up the statue of himself in the temple. Okay, and then finally after the tribulation. Those are the 4 segments of the future that Jesus taught. So there's something big that happens in the middle. I just explained it, and we will read about it more in chapters 12 and 13, and that's when Antichrist comes to power as the economic ruler of the world. Okay. And so probably these 7 trumpets began to take place about that time. And another really interesting difference between the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets is that the 7 seals all deal primarily with things that have been happening on our troubled planet all along and will get worse toward the end, like wars and famines and plagues and stuff like that. Natural problems that get worse. But the 7 trumpets could be explained more by supernatural. And when we get to it, we're going to see, like, for instance, asteroids might come down, or thermonuclear war might happen to fulfill some of these trumpet judgments. But there's a supernatural direction behind it. The Lord is actually bringing these things on the earth. The first part, maybe they're brought on by our own depravity, but now the Lord brings them. And it becomes really obvious with these 7 that there's a supernatural component, at least, to each one of them. So let's read chapter 8, verse 1. When he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And that's kind of shocking, isn't it?
Does that mean that the women will not be there?
I was afraid somebody would ask that. I've always heard it, and I wasn't going to say it. You better run when the class is over.
He says, does that mean the women won't be here?
Very interesting. Okay, so anyway, well, I don't know what it means. But it is a awesome introduction to something else. If you really want to get people's attention sometimes, you just stop talking. And then they listen. They want to find out why, And I think that's kind of what this is. But verse 2, we have, I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all God's people on the golden altar in front of the throne. The smoke of the incense together with the prayers of God's people went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth, and there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. This scary stuff is all just preparatory to the blowing of the first trumpet. But isn't it interesting, again, we just see it over and over in Revelation. Bad stuff happening down here on the earth, but up here in heaven, God's in control. And the thing that is hurled to the earth at this point that begins the 7 trumpets is the prayers of the saints, you know. And we're praying, and the martyrs are praying, and God's going to move. So let's look at the trumpets. The first trumpet we call the scorching of the earth, and we'll begin reading about that in verse 7. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. All of these things that happen now are going to destroy big portions of the earth. This is, some of the commentators call this first one the destruction of vegetation. But it's not all vegetation. It's about a third of the earth, though. So can you imagine what chaos that will cause for whatever this thing is to destroy a third of the crops, a third of the forest protections, and the ecology that goes with that, you know? It's unbelievably catastrophic. And we need to ask at this point, are these going to be asteroids from heaven, comets? Will they be other things from heaven like space junk? We've got a problem with that now. Things that are entering the atmosphere sometimes that they didn't plan right about. Or will they be nuclear war? Hal Lindsey said that he thinks all these trumpet judgments are nuclear war. We already kind of touched on this last week too, didn't we? That, well, I don't know. You know, it could be either. God doesn't need to use man's horrible development of the nuclear weaponry because he's got all these satellites up there in space, and it's unbelievable how many there are. I think they say something like 40,000 of them, near Earth objects. I'm going to take this off and get into more. But some of them, many of them, could actually come and hit the Earth. And I think that God just protects us. Our atmosphere protects us. And so God made the atmosphere. He can change all that if he wants to. But it could be. Many of these, if you just say, wait a minute, John could not have said anything about nuclear warfare per se. How would he describe this? Some of these really do fit. They could be multiple warheads and stuff like that. So I don't know. And I think it's better not to try to be dogmatic about something that could be fulfilled by either natural or supernatural means. But what I do know is that it's directed supernaturally. That's what I was trying to say a while ago. Even if it's an atomic explosion or a bunch of them that wipes out a third of the vegetation of the earth, that God has directed or allowed it to happen, supernatural intervention.
It always seems like that's all. Hail and fire are always kind of combined together. Is there a reason for that?
Well, my thought about this, because I kind of think that there's nuclear warfare involved in some of it, but not all of it. What if a comet? You know, we've never been hit by a big comet, but comets are made out of ice, right? And so if a big comet were to come, it would cause a huge explosion. That'd be fire, I'm sure. Horrible devastation like this, but it would also result in a sudden influx of way too much water up there that would probably then come down as ice. So it's just a possibility, though. Fire and ice is kind of a scary combination, isn't it? So, I mean, there's all kinds of ways that this stuff can happen. That's what we're trying to get across. Let's think of some possibilities, but let's not say that's what's going to happen. The story can't be written until afterwards, and it'll be a fascinating story in heaven of how God worked all this out. The second trumpet, in verses 8 and 9, the second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Among those near-Earth objects is a mile-wide asteroid called Iscarus. And a mile isn't very big, but we're told that it probably wouldn't take more than that to do all of this damage. And especially if it fell right in the middle of one of the oceans, between the impact, the flooding, the pressure, the death of all of the creatures and everything like that, and who knows what else a foreign body from space will bring in. One of these poisons part of the Earth. You know, that could be a chemical that we don't know anything about, or an element that we don't know anything about. So this is scary stuff. But then there's things like hail and fire mixed with blood. Have you ever heard of blood coming down in the rain and the hail? If not, watch the Weather Channel.
Yeah.
Because they have a series called The World's Most Unusual Weather. I think it's called that, right, Barbara? And every once in a while they'll show how blood comes down because of a tornado that has sucked up animals into the sky. Or
red algae.
Yeah, or algae from the sea or whatever. Yeah. And all kinds of weird stuff that you wouldn't think would happen happens in this natural cycle. Just imagine what could happen in a supernatural cycle. But so this is a huge mountain. It caused another third damage of the life in the seas. And I was going to say something about Fukushima, but I'm just going to wait till later on about that. But you know, they don't tell you everything bad about the Fukushima accident with the earthquakes and the tidal waves that happened a few years ago. But every once in a while it comes out that we've got radiation on our coastline because of that. We have debris on our coastline because of that. And the life in the sea is affected by that. Who knows how radioactive they're getting? I don't know. It might be a little bit, it might be a big deal. You know? But this is a polluted planet. And the Lord's got to straighten us out and give us a fresh start with the millennium. And only good guys start the millennium. Well, we'll save that till the very end here, but I can't wait. Well, let's look at the third trumpet, which we call the souring of the water. Third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on the third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. So this is the one that I was talking about that brings some sort of poison or radioactive material or something into our environment that is going to be very bad for us. And wormwood means bitterness, and it's also tied to the name Chernobyl.
Yeah.
The Chernobyl reactor that melted down. How long ago now? So long. But they're still, I mean, that whole area is just wasted because of it. And so something that can like permanently contaminate the earth has come. And this one is called a star. I need to comment about that. The earth is a planet, of course, and we have a star in our solar system. I'm trying to remind myself of the sizes here. But we all know, here it is, the diameter of our sun is 86,000 miles. That's the diameter. The Earth's diameter is almost 8,000. 8,000 versus 860,000. So you can see we're just a speck against our. So the sun, being a small star, it's not even considered a big one, could never fall into the earth, but the earth would fall into the star. But that's not what's happening here either, because the word that's used for star is aster in the Greek, okay? It's the word actually that you get also Esther, Queen Esther's name from. That means star. So asteroids are what are in view here, not stars, sun-sized stars. That doesn't make sense. And it does a lot of damage. The third of the sun, the moon, and the stars are darkened. And that's going to be the fourth trumpet, so let's look at that, verse 12. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. What does this really sound like to you?
Pollution, dust,
It's
earth stirred up.
the sun and the moon are still there, and the stars are still there, don't you think? But the atmosphere is so messed up. Yeah.
Ron, I remember in high school, one Good Friday, it was black from 12 to 3.
In
This was back in St.
New
Louis.
England, right?
Pardon?
Where you lived? You saw
Yeah.
this yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, fantastic. I was going to give you another example of one that happened in New England, okay?
Oh, no, this happened, this is when I was in high school. And at this time, you know, we were scared. We made all kinds of funny jokes about it, you know, because we were scared.
Yeah.
Even though we were
But I mean,
Friday.
how dark was it during that time?
It was pretty dark.
Pretty
It was
dark.
almost night.
Yeah. It was in the 1700s that New England had this dark day. And they didn't figure out until a long time later, because they didn't have modern news like we do, that it was caused by a huge forest fire. But people thought it was the end of the world. It was that dramatic. Volcano definitely is the next thought that I have in my notes here about this. And we talk about Yellowstone being a supervolcano. How bad would it be if it totally exploded?
Destroy our whole country.
They say it would wipe out at least a half of the country, and it would mess us up completely, you know, as a country. And not only that, but the smoke and ash from that huge caldera exploding, super volcano that it is, would actually affect the whole world.
Yes.
It would have what they've been calling ever since the advent of the atomic bomb, nuclear winter. That's what they're really worried about, in addition to the destruction of atomic bombs themselves, is the dust and the smoke and the poisons that would go into the air and go around the world. But I remember in, was it 1980 when Mount St. Helens blew?
Mount Helen.
Oh, yeah.
I was working with Prison Fellowship at that time. For about 12 years, I would go out once every month or two to a prison somewhere in the country and spend 3 days in the highest security areas of the prison teaching the Bible. Yeah.
In prison.
It was, my kids said, yeah, they have to tell their friends, my dad's in prison again this. So anyway, we did one up in Washington just before Mount St. Helens blew. And it was all the news, and when we were up there, it was big headlines. Get ready, it could happen anytime. And so we had a break after our Friday or Saturday session coming up, and I had taken 2 other guys up there with me. So the 3 of us decided we would pool our resources and rent a small plane, you know, and a pilot. We didn't know it was to go, you know, get an aerial view of it, you know, because there was smoke coming out, and they said it could blow any minute. But because it could blow any minute, the guy said, okay, I can do it, but we're not allowed to get any closer than 20 miles, because if it blows, we're dead meat, you know. So we said, okay, we got on the plane, and by the time we got there, it was totally covered with clouds and stuff. Could not see it. So disappointed. And we flew right over, we did see Spirit Lake through a hole in the clouds, which got obliterated the next day. But when we flew home the next day, we were in an airliner, and it was a clear day, and we did get to see it from there, up above. Yeah, I was happy to see that. And the next day it blew.
Wow.
Yeah. And then about few months later, I don't remember how many, it was less than a year later, we flew over it again on our way to Israel. We're taking the polar route, and it just looked like a moonscape down there, you know. But what I'm kind of getting at here is that when Mount St. Helens blew, which is very small compared to what Yellowstone would do, it affected the atmosphere for a couple of years all the way around the world. And that was the first year we went to Oberammergau after Israel. Some of you have done that with us.
Yeah.
We'll go to Israel and then Oberammergau because it's a great combination. And Oberammergau and all of Germany and all of Europe had rain every single day of the whole summer because of Mount St. Helens. So if it were a volcano, let's not spend any more time on this because that's just one of many possibilities for this darkness. But if it were that, you might say, well, it's a natural disaster. Yes, but again, it was brought on by the trumpet blowing of the angel and the will of God, and so there's supernatural energy there. The fifth trumpet takes us into chapter 9, and I can never really see what time it is from that clock.
9:20.
9:20, okay. I think it might be just as well if we would just do chapter 9 next week, because we can open this up for some questions, okay? But what we've had up to this point are dreadful enough, but the next three are much, much worse. And they're very supernatural. And they're called the three woes, okay? When the first one is over, the comment in the book is the first woe is past and there's two more. And then there's the second one, and then there's the third one. And we'll start studying that next week.